We're in the third of 4 episodes of the story Cool Blue. This one's actually called Cool Blue. This is the title name episode of these of this tetralogy, this 4 stories series. When we left off, do you remember how Bull Deckhand ended? Where did we leave off? What do you remember about Bull Deckhand at the Charnay?
Well, the guy fell down the stairs, and his brother, after he left the ship, his brother-in-law left with him.
Yes, and that he did. He fell face forward. I had nothing to do with it. That was the amazing thing. I got all the credit and did none of the work. But he pitched forward and must have hit every step on the way down. And yes, his brother-in-law Stevie quit with him. That opened up 2 positions, right? That meant that the, quote, Bull Deckhand position was now open. And moreover, the deck watch position was open. So I jumped. I jumped from the lowliest deckhand to deck watch in one fell swoop. The benefits were manyfold, but chief amongst them was moving forward. I got to move from the after quarters to the forward quarters, and that already helped things enormously. A watch was to die for. To have a 4-hour work shift with 8 hours off made the job possible. You can do anything, I find, for 4 hours, but this is part of the business, right? And then have 8 hours off. You can work in the rain. You can work in a downpour for 8 hours and not mind it. You can work in freezing cold for 4 hours and go take a hot shower and you can make it. In this case, it was working still in the summertime in blazing heat and in filth. But equally important was moving forward. Because this ship in the Great Lakes, you only have about 2 months out of the year when the weather's warm. And it can be very, very, very hot, especially when you're not on the water, when you're in the rivers. It can be very, very hot, and the sun is baking down on these decks and on the cabins in the front and the back. It's torrid. And there's no air conditioning. Not provided. You would use it too seldom. Once you're on the lake, it's cool. When this boat was designed and it was originally built was to be operated by steam. When it was first built, it was for long runs from Chicago and Detroit up to Duluth, and so it was on the water most of the time. Not in a shuttle run like we were making, 11 hours and hours in port on either end, Milwaukee or Chicago. It's hot. It could be in July and August, it could be 90 degrees outside, and when you were inside a metal building with the sun baking on it all day long, it could be 100 plus. And with no air conditioning, you had no choice but to open up the portholes. And the problem was that the wind was usually blowing offshore. It was coming in from the land and blowing out to the water. So it was blowing it right across the boat. And the coal dust that was being loaded was blowing into your room. You had a fan. That's the only relief you had. But the fan was blowing more coal dust in. And if you went out to work and you sealed off your porthole, you went back to a veritable sauna when you were finished. If you left the porthole open, you had coal dust covering your bed, covering your sheets. Place was filthy. First thing I decided was I got to clean this thing up. And so I could tell that at one time the linoleum tile had been light in color, maybe even white. I got a galvanized bucket, filled it up with water and spick and span. I think I put about half a box of spick and span in that thing. And then I began to scrub the deck in my quarters. I scrubbed that thing and scrubbed on it. Do you know what I found underneath all that soot?
Gold.
More soot? Gold. I know what you mean. That would have been great, Armani. More soot. Underneath all that soot was more of it. You could not get it clean. The deck had probably not been swabbed for decades. On top of it, and I'm going to show you afterwards pictures, the bathroom was shared by about 10 people, and there were a couple of shower stalls in it, and nobody ever cleaned them. I was afraid of getting something contagious or incurable taking a shower, and so I tried to clean it up. I told the guys, we'll take turns. They said, what's the point? It's just going to get dirty again. Wow, I mean, how do you deal with that kind of attitude? Oh man, it was vile. Yes, but when I got promoted, I got to move forward. Now, unfortunately, fortunately, I'm going to share a room with George, and George's room was on the other side. He had been sharing a room with Stevie, so I took over Stevie's old bunk. But he was on the other side, the side that the boat was against the dock and loading from. So we were still getting all that coal dust. There was still no air conditioning. And after working for a couple of days, even living up in the front with my new watch, I told George the only way I can make it is if we get an air conditioner. And George says, well, so let's get one. He lived in South Chicago, not far from the dock, 6-7 blocks away. So when we got in, he borrowed his family's car and he went to Sears and he went shopping for an air conditioner. The problem is that air conditioners are square or rectangular and portholes are round. And the smallest air conditioner he could find was about an inch larger than the diameter of the porthole. Might as well have been 6 inches, 8 inches too big. I mean, metal against metal doesn't give. I was disappointed. He didn't buy it and bring it back. He just took the measurements and came back and measured it wasn't going to work. He said, don't worry, I got a backup plan. He says, we'll build a box around the porthole and we'll put the air conditioner in it and it'll vent out the porthole through the back. Sounded good. So we started getting the room clean, getting it ready. Once again, scrubbed that thing down, scrubbed the overhead, scrubbed the bulkheads, scrubbed the deck, changed the wash water every time it got filthy, which was just about every time we rinsed out the brush or the sponge. Yes, must have changed wash water about 50 times in there. But I'd never seen a room on that boat that clean. It was immaculate. And we kept the porthole closed, albeit hot, because we didn't want to get it dirty ever again. I said to George, man, it's too bad we can't put a fresh coat of paint on it. He said, why can't we? I said, where are we going to get interior paint? They haven't painted on this boat forever. George knew the boat like the back of his hand. When George was on watch and he didn't have something to do, he would go exploring. He had been through the paint locker. He knew exactly what the stock was. He said, we'll get some paint down in the paint locker. We'll paint it. First mate said, whatever you do, paint it according to code, nothing else. So we went down and paint on a boat came in 5-gallon, big 5-gallon tins. Man, interior green felt pretty light. And when we pried the lid off, the one and only can, it was bone dry. The only thing that was in it were little flecks of rust that had fallen off of the lid. And it kind of looked like what our room had looked like before we cleaned it up. Do you know what I mean? Oh, man, George, no paint. George says, that's all right. He has a solution for everything. He says, that's all right. We'll mix our own. So he got a can of deck enamel green, forest green, dark green, hunter green, right? And he got a can of white enamel. And he said, pour a few drops in there. And I poured a few drops of of green into the white. And he started to stir. Now what happens? What happens when you mix white with forest green? What do you get? Light green, right? You would think so, but my friends, paint is chemistry. And color comes in shades. Even white has a tint. There's white with yellow tint. There's white with rose tint. There's white with green tint. When we stirred the paint, it turned blue.
No way.
Yes, it turned blue. I said, oh no, that's blue. George says, yeah, it's kind of nice. Pour a few more drops in there. So I did, and he kept stirring. It was the most beautiful shade of blue I believe I'd ever seen. It was ice blue. It was robin egg blue. It was sky blue. I said, too bad we can't use it. He said, what do you mean? We're using it. I said, the mate said paint it according to code or nothing at all. George says, what are they going to do? Fire us? He had a point. They couldn't get anybody to work on the boat as it was, right? So we went back up. We went back up to the room, and man, oh man, enamel. Enamel paints differently. We were painting it on that old, flat, worn-out paint. It went on like a dream. It went on so smoothly and left not a single brush stroke. It was a joy to paint. It was a marvel to contemplate. It was a reverie to behold. We painted it. Masking tape, that's what masking tape is for. We taped off all the edges so that all the edges were perfectly crisp, right? Then you peel the paint or peel the tape off. And the paint looks like it was painted up there by a machine or something. The candle, when we lit a candle, you could see it glowing in the sheen on the walls. I said, my goodness, this is gorgeous. And George says, we ought to name it. And I said, oh yeah, what do you think? True Blue? He said, True Blue's pretty good. He said, but how about Cool Blue? In anticipation of those wonderfully cool temperatures we'll soon be luxuriating in. Cool Blue is what we named it, Cool Blue. And it became not only the name of the paint, Brianna, it became the name of the room itself. And for short, we many times just called it Blue. George would tell the other deckhands or whatever when we finally got a few, we'd be working and he'd say, well, it's about watch time. I'm going to go up to Blue, take a shower and kick back and relax. He got the air conditioner. He built the box. George was good with tools, man. His dad was an arc welder in the steel mills. That's what was on the east side. Lots and lots of steel mills. And George was good with tools. He went home and got tools and got materials. And he's carrying the stuff up the ladder and up the deck. And everybody's noticing. And they're hearing power saws. And they're hearing hammering. And they're curious. They're peeking in, taking a look, see what's going on. What are you doing? George says, man, we're getting ready for an air conditioner. And when we put it in, it's going to be so cool in here, we'll need about 3 blankets to sleep in this summer heat. He said, don't worry, when we get underway, when we get it installed, we'll invite y'all in for an open house. Yeah. He built the box and we painted it. It matched. It was cool blue, of course. Nice enough to bury the captain in. Boy, it was a beauty. He went and bought the air conditioner and slid it in. It fit like a glove, man. It just slid right into that box perfectly. No gaps, right? Sealed perfectly. And put out the invitation. When we get underway, we're having open house at Cool Blue. You're casually invited. Bring a jacket. Not bring a jacket like coat and tie. Bring a jacket like in case it's so cold we don't want you getting pneumonia. Right? Oh my God. They showed up in force on a coal boat. There's nothing else to do. So we must have had about 90% of everybody who was off watch, and a few who were on it and weren't required in the moment. And they crowded into the room, so many we had to turn some away. George told them, don't worry, we'll get you on the second showing. They piled in. And what you got to realize is that in anticipation of this, we went all out. Before we ever got the air conditioner, we decorated this room like a dream. George had a lazy boy at home, and there was a corner that was open. I mean, this room it was kind of like the TA auditorium with all those crazy angles. It's in a bow of a ship, so it's not a perfect rectangle or a perfect square. There's not too many 90-degree corners in this thing. But he had this, more or less, this one corner that was open at the end of the bunk beds, and he got a lazy boy and he slid that sucker in there, and then he built a bookcase over the top of it so I could put my books up there. He even put a bar to hold them in so that when we were in a roll or we were at sea and it was a little bit rough, it wouldn't pitch my books out on us. We had a light that you could put right over the top of your books. We had an 8-track tape player at that time, 8-track, and had headphones. And the cord, that super coil cord, came down and hung close by. His was a recliner rocker lazy boy, and the deck was a little bit sloped so that when you rocked back, you were almost stretched out. You were almost lying in a bed. It was very, very, very comfortable. George says, you know, the only problem with this is that we have one lazy boy and we're two. We're gonna need a second lazy boy. I said, well, George, where are we gonna put it? There's no room. All we had was bunk beds and a stationary chest of drawers. I mean, it's anchored to the bulkhead so that it won't slide if you're in rough water. And then there were 2 lockers that were mounted to the bulkhead right across from the beds. George says, that's where we got to put it. I said, what are we going to do with the lockers? He says, we'll take them down. I said, what are we going to do with our gear? He says, we'll take the lockers down. We'll put them in the utility room across the hall. He says, there's already 6 lockers over there. We'll just put 2 more. We'll put ours in there, and we can stow our gear. And he says, the best part of it is when we come in from working in all that coal, we'll change clothes over in the utility room, and we won't bring the coal dust into Blue. Sounded great, man. He says that tonight, when we're on the run, when we're coming back from Milwaukee, we'll take the lockers off and switch them over to the utility room. So he was on watch, but at night he was working 4 to 8 when we were underway. He came back to the room and he had socket wrenches and screwdrivers, and we proceeded to take the lockers off the bulkhead, or try. Unfortunately, the lockers weren't screwed to the bulkhead. They were riveted. Do you know the difference? What's the difference between a bolt and a rivet? Anybody know that? A rivet's like permanent. Yeah, you can't, it's not designed to be unfastened. So we had to resort to a crowbar. And by the time we got those lockers off the bulkhead, they didn't exactly look like they did before we started. I said, George, we could have a problem here. This is like destroying ship's property. He said, well, wait a minute. I'll be right back. And he was gone for a moment. He came back, he says, grab the end of those things. And I did. He grabbed the other end and I followed him. He led us right out on deck. It's night now, we're on the run. And the pilot house is up above, but we're up close against the walls so that nobody can see us. He walked right over to the side of the boat. We hoisted those lockers up and gave him the old heave-ho. With the water sloshing against the deck and the wind blowing, why, they hardly made a sound if you didn't know what you were listening for. Kerplunk. Those lockers hit the water, and I don't think they hovered more than about 1 second. I mean, we're underway, but I could see them going down. And they were gone. That night, we had stowed our lockers in Davy Jones's locker. Kerplunk. We got back in, and George went and got the air conditioner. He had slid it into place. We had the boys in for open house. They fought for the lazy boys, man. A couple of them were sitting on the arms of the thing, and guys were sitting up on the top bunk, and guys were sitting down on the bottom bunk, and everybody else was sitting cross-legged on the floor. And George turned on the AC. We even bought a case of beer, iced it up so that the guys would have it was BYO, but for those who didn't bring something, we had something for them. And everybody was in a festive mood. George turned the AC on, and he said, I'm only going to turn it on part way because I don't want anybody to get sick, right? He turned the thing on, and it kicked in and purred like a kitten that was trapped in a box. It coughed and sputtered a moment or two and finally started to run, and we waited for it to get cool. Now there's one member of the crew. He's working down in the tunnel gang, and he's 6'4", and he's Big Petey. His dad was a bridge tender in Chicago, had all the political connections you can imagine. Petey was a worker. He was also a serious drinker. He was a mimic. Do you know what a mimic is? He'd listen to you for about a half a watch. He'd listen to you for about two hours, and he'd get down your favorite expressions and your manner of saying them, and then he could mimic you. He could mimic everybody in the crew. And of course, when he went up the street, everybody'd buy him beers and get him to do imitations of everybody in the crew. Big Pete was a practical joker, and there's nothing he liked better than a joke on somebody else. And when he saw the air conditioner wasn't working, put his hand against that box, and it felt as hot as an oven. Because the air was trapped inside the box. The back was venting out, but most of the air was pouring out the sides, and it couldn't escape anywhere. The box was actually hot, and the air conditioner was actually making the room warmer. When Pete figured that out, we were laughing stocks. Cool blue feels more like blue flame, if you ask me. Yeah, man. And all the rest of those lame lunatics joined in, and they were making fun of us and laughing, and the open house was a total flop. And I was crestfallen. Oh, man. My dreams of cool blueness were dashed. I'm figuring I'm going to have to go back and work on a river. At least I can sleep at night, or at least I can sleep when I'm off watch. George said, relax, man, I got a backup plan. Always. In his explorations of the boat, he had been down below into the hidden recesses of the engine room, and he had found a wooden door. And he had taken the tape measure down, and to his delight, it was precisely the dimensions of ours. I think all the doors were standard size, but it was precisely the dimensions. He brought the wooden door back, and the next time we were in port, he cut off the top, 18, 20 inches of the door. And he mounted it permanently. He bored holes in the jamb, and he mounted this part of the door permanently to the door jamb. And then he took it down and cut out precisely the dimensions of the air conditioner. And he slid it in up there, and now we only had about 5 feet of head clearance. But we had the air conditioner perfectly mounted, and it was now venting properly. And even though this was a reasonably small unit, it was designed for a space about 4 times what we had. So the room wasn't merely cool. On the very lowest setting, it was frigid. Yes, it was really cold. I mean, in the middle of July and August, we were like putting a sweatshirt on when we came into Cool Blue. To leave, you had to give it one of these numbers to get in or to get out, right? You had to give it this action. It's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland, but hey, it was worth it, man. And the best part of all of it was, anytime anybody walked by our room, they got a blast of hot air right in the face. Because it was like the phoenix had risen from the ashes. And Blue was very much alive. I'll show you, give me a second, I'll show you pictures. Owens, do you make this stuff up? Sure I do. And then I take pictures of it.
What happened to George?
What happened to George? That's coming in the next episode. This was a sunny day in the middle of the winter, but that was just the dirt on the payphone. This is before cell phones, guys. If you went to the payphone and you made a phone call, your ear would be covered with coal dust. Yes. That's George. George was about an inch taller than the tallest of us. And he frequently wore mirrored shades that left you looking at a reflection of yourself. These were the showers back in the Doghouse. Check that out. Huh? Oh man, people would like open a bar of soap and just like throw the wrapper on the floor. They finished their shampoo, they would just discard the bottle on the floor of the shower. It was vile. Look at that, man. Would that not kill the urge? Huh? My goodness, huh? Yes, no, I'm telling you. Huh? Oh, Turkish Toilet, you wish you had one. Man, oh man, but cool blueness. Look at this. Matching bedspreads. Matching bedspreads. Yeah, good enough, man. Good enough. What's that?
Did you get the bottom off at the top?
I had the top, but we taped off all the electricity and everything. All the cables were on the ceiling. Nothing was behind the walls. Everything was out where you could work on it. But at the same time, they were pretty sturdy, and one of them had a loop in it, and you could grab a hold of the loop with one hand, put your hand on the bed with the other, and you could swing yourself up into bed. Look at this. The lazy boy. The lazy boy, and you know what that is, right? Right over here. That was the box that we initially used for the air conditioner, and it became the liquor closet. Yes, liquor cabinet. Yes. I even brought, you'll see that, you know what this is? That was a harpoon a buddy had brought me when he went to New England. He asked me, he said, "Is there anything you want?" I said, "Sure, bring me a harpoon." I was joking. Right? He found a harpoon and brought it back for me. Yes. I had it on my adventures to the Great Lakes. I brought my harpoon just in case we saw Moby Dick. Right. That was the 8-track tape system, and there were my books that George had put the bar across so they wouldn't pitch out in a storm.
What books did you have out there?
Books? Oh man, I had Moby Dick was up there for sure. I had Let's Go Europe because I was thinking about making my European venture soon. And George read the first novel that he ever got into, which was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And that book made a reader out of him. After that, he got into a tremendous reading jag.
You have Dr. Seuss up there?
Dr. Seuss? No, I don't think so. No. Look at this, man. There's the air conditioner. I told you, in the door. Huh? And we even put a bucket down below it for the catch water, because that would have been the one thing that the captain would have complained about, was if we'd have had that thing sweating on the deck, it would have been a hazard. So we'd catch the water in the bucket and empty the bucket about once a day or once every 2 or 3. It's kind of dry up on the Great Lakes, not quite as humid as it is down here in Florida. But that, my friends, is the episode of Cool Blue. To be followed next by the final episode, Davy Jones's Locker. Davy Jones's Locker, the 4th and final episode, coming next week. Yes. Thank you! Thank you!